Dawn was barely breaking when 11 luxury vehicles pulled up in front of the rundown repair shop in South Harbor. Rolls-Royce, Bentley, Mercedes. They parked in a line like a silent funeral procession. Ethan Miller stood frozen behind the grease-stained glass door. 24 hours ago, he was just a poor single father who couldn't afford medicine for his son. He had told a billionaire straight to his face, "Money can't fix everything." Now, it seemed the entire world of that man was coming for him. But before you know what happens next, you need to hear this story to the end. The coughing woke him. Not the alarm. Never the alarm. Ethan's eyes opened to the cracked ceiling of the cramped apartment above Miller's auto repair. The coughing came again, wet and rattling, from the mattress on the floor across the room. Leo's voice was small in the pre-dawn darkness. Ethan was already moving, his bare feet cold on the concrete floor. He knelt beside his 8-year-old son and felt his forehead. Still warm. The fever hadn't broken. "Just breathe, buddy." Slow breaths. Leo tried. His small chest heaved with effort. The inhaler sat on the windowsill, nearly empty. The refill prescription was pinned to the wall with a magnet, next to 3 overdue bills and an eviction warning. Choose one, medicine or rent. That was the calculation Ethan made every morning now. He helped Leo sit up against the wall, waited for the breathing to steady. Through the thin walls, he could hear the morning sounds of South Harbor waking up. Truck engines, metal gates rolling open, the world starting its work. The shop below them had been his father's. Then his. The sign outside read Miller's Auto Rep Ire because the A had fallen off 2 years ago, and Ethan couldn't afford to replace it. Couldn't afford much of anything these days. The work had dried up slowly, then all at once. First, the chain repair shops moved in. Then people started going to the dealerships with their warranty work. Then the economy tightened, and folks learned to live with the check engine light on. Now it was just Ethan, a bay full of rusting equipment, and a calendar with more blank days than booked ones. "Dad, I'm okay now." Leo was trying to smile, always trying to smile. "I know you are, tough guy." Ethan made oatmeal on the hot plate, added extra brown sugar from the packets he'd taken from the diner last week. Leo ate slowly, still catching his breath between bites. A knock came at the side door. Mrs. Park stood there with her purse already on her shoulder, ready for her shift at the laundromat. She'd been watching Leo during the day for 3 months now, ever since Ethan couldn't afford the after-school program anymore. She never asked for payment. Ethan tried to give her what he could. She usually refused. "He's not good today," Ethan said quietly. Mrs. Park's expression tightened with concern. She'd raised 4 kids on less than nothing. She knew what it meant when a cough lasted this long. "I'll keep him quiet, make him rest." "Thank you, Ethan." She touched his arm. "You're a good father. You know that, right?" He didn't know what to say to that. He nodded. Down in the shop, he turned on the lights. The fluorescent bulbs flickered, hummed, then caught. The bay was clean at least. He kept it clean. Professional. Even when there was no work, he maintained standards. His phone sat on the workbench, screen cracked, battery at 12%. He couldn't remember the last time he'd charged it overnight. Electricity cost money. One new message. Unknown number. Need specialist wheelchair repair. Urgent. Will pay well. Address 1847 Riverside Heights. Ethan read it twice. Riverside Heights. That was the neighborhood where money lived, where the houses had gates and the lawns had landscapers. He hadn't worked in that part of town in 5 years. His thumb hovered over the message. Part of him wanted to delete it. Rich people didn't call places like Miller's Auto Repair. This was probably a wrong number, or a scam. But the rent was due in 6 days, and Leo needed medicine. He typed back. "What time?" The response came immediately. "Now. Please." Ethan looked up at the ceiling, where Leo was coughing again. He grabbed his tool bag. The drive to Riverside Heights took 20 minutes in his beat-up pickup truck. Every mile, the neighborhood transformed. Strip malls gave way to tree-lined streets. Chain-link fences became stone walls. Cracked sidewalks disappeared entirely, replaced by perfectly maintained private drives. His truck sputtered at a red light. A woman in yoga clothes jogging past gave it a concerned look, like it might explode. Ethan didn't blame her. It might. The GPS led him to a street where the houses weren't visible from the road. Just gates. Just intercoms. Just security cameras on stone pillars. Number 1847. Ethan pulled up to the call box, suddenly aware of every rattle in his engine, every rust spot on his hood. He pressed the button. "Miller's Auto Repair," he said. "Here for the wheelchair." A pause. Then the gate began to open. The driveway curved through manicured grounds. The house at the end wasn't a house, it was an estate. Modern architecture, all glass and steel and sharp angles, probably cost more than Ethan would make in 10 lifetimes. He parked his truck next to a fountain. The fountain alone probably cost more than his shop. The front door opened before he could knock. A man stood there. Late 50s, silver hair, suit without a tie. He looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine about successful people. "Mr. Miller?" "That's me, Richard Vaughn." No handshake offered. "Thank you for coming on short notice." The message said, "Wheelchair repair?" "Yes." "My daughter's." The manufacturer sent their top technician last week. He made adjustments. She's been in worse pain ever since. Richard's voice was controlled, but something underneath wasn't. Something that sounded like barely contained frustration. "I'll take a look. She's in the sunroom." Ethan followed him through halls that felt more like a museum than a home. Original art on walls, marble floors, everything perfect and cold and expensive. The sunroom was at the back of the house, all windows overlooking a garden. In the center sat a girl, maybe 16, in a powered wheelchair that looked like it cost more than Ethan's truck. "Sophia," Richard said. "This is Mr. Miller. He's here to look at your chair." The girl turned to look at Ethan. She had her father's sharp features, but none of his hardness. Her eyes were intelligent, assessing, and tired. The kind of tired that came from chronic pain. "Another technician," she said. Her voice was flat. Not rude, just done. "I fix cars mostly," Ethan admitted. "But mechanics is mechanics." The last specialist had 3 degrees from MIT. Then he should have gotten it right. Something flickered in her expression. Almost a smile. "May I?" Ethan gestured to the chair. Sophia nodded. Ethan knelt beside the wheelchair. It was a masterpiece of engineering. Carbon fiber frame, pressure-sensing cushions, computerized positioning controls. Every adjustment measured to the millimeter. He placed his hand on the backrest. Then he looked up at Sophia. "Where does it hurt?" She blinked. "What?" "When you sit here, where does it hurt?" Nobody had asked her that before. He could tell by the way her expression changed. "My right shoulder," she said quietly. Ethan nodded. He looked at the chair again. "I see the problem." Richard stepped forward. The technician spent 4 hours making adjustments based on the latest biomechanical research. "He built it for an idea of your daughter," Ethan interrupted. "Not for your actual daughter." The words hung in the air. Richard Vaughn's expression hardened. That technician has worked with Paralympic athletes, professional rehabilitation centers. He's one of the leading. "I'm sure he is," Ethan said. He stayed kneeling, eye level with Sophia. But he didn't ask where it hurt, did he? Sophia's silence was the answer. Ethan ran his hand along the backrest alignment. "This is positioned for optimal spinal support. Textbook perfect. Except..." He glanced at Sophia's posture. "You're compensating, leaning left, dropping your right shoulder to avoid pressure. The technician said I needed to adjust my sitting habits." "No." Ethan's voice was gentle but firm. "The chair needs to adjust to you. That's the whole point." He stood up, looked at Richard. "Your daughter's been in pain for how long?" "6 months," Sophia answered before her father could. "Since the last upgrade. And everyone told you to adapt to the new system." She nodded. Ethan turned to Richard. "That's the problem. You bought the best technology money could get. But technology doesn't feel pain." "She does." Richard's jaw tightened. "My daughter has access to the finest specialists in the country. I'm not questioning that, Mr. Vaughn. I'm questioning whether they listened." The room went very quiet. Richard Vaughn was not a man accustomed to being challenged. Ethan could see it in the way he held himself, in the controlled breath he took before speaking. "Mr. Miller, I appreciate your directness. But I didn't call you here to criticize the experts I've hired." "Then why did you call me?" The question surprised them both. Richard didn't have an answer. Or he did, but couldn't say it, because the experts failed. Sophia spoke up. "Can you fix it?" Ethan looked at her. Really looked. He saw Leo in her face. Different circumstances, different lives, but the same expression. The look of a kid who'd learned to live with hurting. "I can try. How long would it take?" Ethan examined the chair more closely. The alignment was wrong in 3 places. The cushioning was too firm in spots, too soft in others. The control interface was positioned for convenience, not comfort. To do it right? 24 hours. Maybe more. "The manufacturer's technician will be back next week," Richard said. "Perhaps you could consult with him." "Dad." Sophia's voice was quiet but sharp. "I've been waiting 6 months. Let him try." Father and daughter looked at each other. A whole conversation happened in that silence. Finally, Richard nodded. 24 hours, he said to Ethan. "But I need to understand what makes you think you can solve a problem that trained specialists couldn't." It was a fair question. Ethan thought about the answer. About his shop, where he'd learned to make parts work past their lifetime because customers couldn't afford replacements. About the 1,000 small adaptations he'd made to keep dying machines alive. About sitting up with Leo through bad nights, learning the difference between 10 kinds of coughs, knowing which one needed the inhaler and which one needed water and which one needed just a hand on his back. "I don't have degrees," Ethan said, "but I know how to listen to what's broken, and I know how to ask the person living with it what they need." He met Richard's eyes. "Your specialists built something perfect. I'm just going to build something that works for your daughter." Richard studied him for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. 24 hours, Mr. Miller." They shook. Ethan had no idea he'd just agreed to something that would change everything. Ethan spent the first hour just observing. He watched how Sophia moved in the chair, where she adjusted her weight, which controls she used and which she avoided. The small winces she tried to hide. Richard had retreated to his study but kept checking in, hovering. Each time, Ethan felt the weight of scrutiny. "The posture sensor keeps alerting," Sophia explained, pulling up a screen on the chair's control panel. "It says I'm not sitting correctly." Ethan leaned in to look. The display showed a green outline of ideal posture and a red outline of Sophia's actual position. They didn't match. "That's because it's measuring you against a model," he said. "Not against what's comfortable for your body." The technician said the same thing, that I needed to train my body to match the ideal position. Ethan straightened up. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Do you trust that technician?" Sophia hesitated. He had a lot of credentials. "That's not what I asked." She looked down at her hands. "No, I don't trust him. He made me feel like I was the problem, like I was doing something wrong." "You're not doing anything wrong." The words came out harder than Ethan intended. Sophia looked up, surprised. "Sorry," he said. "It's just my son's sick. Has been for months. The doctors keep telling him to push through, to build stamina. But sometimes his body's just telling him he needs to rest. And I'm learning that listening to that isn't weakness, it's wisdom. He gestured at the wheelchair. This is the same thing. Your body's telling you something hurts. That's not a training issue, that's data. Richard appeared in the doorway. Is there a problem? No, sir, Ethan said. Just trying to understand the full picture. The manufacturer assured me this model was state-of-the-art. It is. The engineering's incredible. Ethan ran his hand along the frame. But here's what I'm seeing. This chair was designed for maximum efficiency, maximum support, maximum correction. That's what we wanted. I know. But maximum isn't always optimal. Richard's expression shifted. Explain. Ethan pointed to the backrest. This support system is designed to maintain perfect spinal alignment, so it's firm, unyielding. It won't let your daughter deviate from the ideal position. That's the point. But her body needs to move, needs to shift weight, needs micro-adjustments throughout the day. Ethan looked at Sophia. You've been fighting the chair for 6 months, trying to sit still in a position that doesn't account for how you actually live in it. Sophia's eyes widened. That's exactly what it feels like. The chair's not broken, Ethan continued. It's just solving the wrong problem. It's optimizing for an ideal that doesn't exist in real life. So, what are you suggesting? Richard's voice had an edge to it now. I'm suggesting we listen to your daughter. Build the chair around how she needs to use it, not how an algorithm thinks she should. That contradicts everything the specialists recommended. I know. Richard took a step forward. Mr. Miller, I've spent a considerable amount of money on those recommendations. On research. On the best possible care, and I respect that. But money can't buy the answer if you're asking the wrong question. The words landed like a physical blow. Richard's face flushed. You're telling me I've been asking the wrong question about my own daughter's care? I'm telling you that sometimes the people closest to a problem can't see it clearly because it matters too much. Silence. Then Sophia spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. He's right, Dad. Richard turned to her. I've been in pain for 6 months, she said, and nobody asked me where it hurt. They just kept adjusting the chair and telling me I'd adapt. Her voice cracked on the last word. Richard's expression crumbled. Richard Vaughn sat down heavily in the nearest chair. For a moment, he looked nothing like a billionaire, just a father who'd failed his daughter. What do you need? He asked quietly. Ethan pulled out his phone, opened the Notes app. I need to take measurements. Real ones, based on how Sophia actually sits, not how she's supposed to sit. Okay, I'll need to rebuild the cushioning system. Reposition the backrest. Recalibrate the sensors. How long? Ethan looked at the wheelchair, at Sophia, at the complexity of what he was promising. 24 hours. That's impossible, I know. But if I take it back to my shop, work through the night, I can have it ready by tomorrow morning. Richard stood. I'll call the manufacturer. Get their engineering team on a call. No. Ethan's voice was firm. The more people involved, the longer this takes, and the more your daughter hurts. Mr. Miller, this is a $60,000 piece of medical equipment. I understand. And if I break it, you can sue me for everything I own. Which, fair warning, isn't much. Ethan met his eyes. But I'm not going to break it. I'm going to fix it. Richard studied him. Why are you so confident? Because I have to be. Ethan's voice dropped. My son's upstairs in my shop right now. He's 8. He's been sick for months, and I can't afford the medicine he needs. The only reason I'm here, taking this job, is because I'm desperate enough to try anything. He took a breath. But here's the thing. That desperation, it makes me careful. It makes me think about consequences, about what happens if I fail. I'm not going to treat your daughter's chair like an experiment. I'm going to treat it like my son's, depending on it, because he is. The honesty hung in the air. Richard reached into his jacket, pulled out his wallet. How much is the medicine? Mr. Vaughn. How much? $250. The number came out like an admission of failure. Richard pulled out bills, handed them over. "Get the medicine for your son. Then fix my daughter's chair. 24 hours. Ethan looked at the money in his hand. For a moment, he couldn't speak. "I'll have it back tomorrow morning," he finally said. He started disconnecting the chair's systems. Sophia wheeled herself to a manual backup chair in the corner insurance requirement, she explained. She moved with practiced efficiency, used to transfers. As Ethan loaded the electric chair into his truck bed, Richard followed him out. "Mr. Miller, if you're right about this, if you can do what the specialists couldn't." Richard's voice was quiet. "It would mean I've been listening to the wrong people for 6 months. It would mean you've been trying everything you could think of. That's not wrong. That's love." Richard's throat worked. He nodded. Ethan drove away with the billionaire's trust in his truck bed and medicine money in his pocket. He had 24 hours to prove he deserved either. 9 p.m. The shop was locked, lights blazing. Ethan had sent Mrs. Park home, carried Leo down to the bay, set him up on the couch in the office with blankets and his tablet. "You're working on a wheelchair?" Leo asked, peering through the office window at the sleek machine in the center of the bay. "It looks expensive." "It is. Are you scared you'll break it?" Ethan paused. Honesty had always been his policy with Leo. "Yeah, buddy, I'm pretty scared. But you're doing it anyway. Because someone needs help." Leo nodded seriously. "Like when you help Mrs. Park's car even though she can't pay. Exactly like that. You're a good person, Dad." Ethan's eyes stung. He blinked it away. "Get some sleep, okay? I'll be right here." He turned back to the wheelchair. The first step was documentation. He photographed everything, every angle, every connection, every setting. If he broke something, he needed to know how to put it back. Then he began disassembly. The chair was a marvel of engineering. Everything interlocked with precision. Every component served multiple functions. It was designed to be maintained by specialists with proprietary tools. Ethan used what he had. On beer, otus pem. He'd removed the entire seating system. The cushions came away in layers, each one calibrated for specific pressure distribution. The backrest was articulated in 6 places, each joint controlled by microservos. He laid everything out on the workbench. Then he pulled out his measurements from Sophia. The difference was immediately obvious. The backrest was configured for someone 3 inches taller. The lumbar support was positioned too low. The shoulder blade's alignment was designed for someone with different proportions. All the adjustments the MIT technician had made were perfectly correct for someone who wasn't Sophia. 1:15 a.m. His phone buzzed. "Mrs. Park." Ethan walked to the office. Leo was asleep, breathing steady. He sent back, "Good tonight? Thank you. And you?" Ethan looked at the partially disassembled wheelchair, at the parts spread across his bay, at the magnitude of what he'd promised. "Working. You can do this." 3 words. They helped more than she'd ever know. 3 a.m. The modification work was delicate. He had to reposition the backrest mounting points without compromising structural integrity. Had to reshape the cushion foam to match Sophia's actual weight distribution. He worked with the same tools he used on transmissions and brake systems. Except this wasn't machinery. This was someone's daily comfort, someone's pain or relief. His hands had to be sure. A sound from the office. Leo was coughing again. Ethan put down his tools, went to his son, gave him water, waited for the breathing to ease. The new medicine was in the cabinet, now he'd bought it on the way back. First dose was helping already. "Dad?" Leo's voice was sleepy. "I hope so, buddy. What's her name?" "Sophia." "That's a pretty name." Leo's eyes were already closing again. "Tell her I hope she feels better." Ethan stayed until Leo was fully asleep. Vortfort 5 a.m. The wheelchair was coming back together. He'd repositioned the backrest for Sophia's actual height and shoulder width, reshaped the seat cushion to accommodate her natural weight shift patterns, recalibrated the pressure sensors to allow for micro-movements instead of forcing rigid positioning. The control interface he'd moved 3 inches to the left. Sophia had mentioned it was hard to reach, a tiny detail. But tiny details accumulated into daily pain. As he reconnected the electronic systems, his hands were shaking from exhaustion and caffeine and fear. If he'd miscalculated anything. The chair powered on, all systems green. He did a full diagnostic. Everything functioning. But the real test wouldn't be in his shop. 6:30 a.m. Dawn light was filtering through the bay door windows. Ethan had cleaned the chair, triple-checked every connection, tested every function. Leo woke up on the couch. "You did it? I built something. Whether it works." Ethan trailed off. "It'll work," Leo said with complete confidence. "You always make things work." Ethan loaded the wheelchair carefully into his truck. They drove to Riverside Heights together. Richard Vaughn answered the door in the same clothes from yesterday. He hadn't slept either. Ethan could tell. "Mr. Miller." His voice was hoarse. "Is that your son?" Leo stood behind Ethan, shy around strangers, but curious about the massive house. "This is Leo. My helper. I help sometimes," Leo said. Then started coughing. Richard's expression shifted something between concern and recognition. "Come in." "Both of you." They rolled the wheelchair into the sunroom. Sophia was already there, dressed, waiting. She looked as exhausted as her father. "Did you sleep?" Ethan asked her. "Did you?" They shared a tired smile. "I made modifications," Ethan began, "based on what you told me about where it hurt. But I need you to test it before I explain anything. I don't want to influence what you feel." Sophia transferred from her backup chair. Settled into the seat. Everyone waited. She sat still for a moment. Her hands gripped the armrests. Her breathing changed. "The backrest is," she paused, "different. Good, different, or bad different?" Ethan's heart was pounding. "It's touching me in different places." She shifted her weight experimentally. "The left side. By my ribs there's more support. But it's soft. That's where you were leaning to avoid pressure on your right side. So I reinforced that area to make the lean comfortable instead of trying to prevent it." Sophia moved again. Testing. "The seat feels wider." "It's not wider. But I redistributed the cushioning to allow for more shifting. You were sitting rigid because movement caused pressure spikes. Now the cushion adapts to movement." She reached for the control interface. "This is closer. 3 inches left." "You mentioned it was a stretch." Richard had been silent, watching. Now, he stepped forward. "How does it feel?" Sophia didn't answer right away. She engaged the motors, drove the chair in a small circle, adjusted the backrest angle, tested the tilt function, then she stopped. Her shoulders, which had been tensed since they arrived, dropped slightly. She took a full breath. "Dad," she said softly. "It doesn't hurt." Richard's breath caught. "The right shoulder, the pressure that's been there for 6 months, it's gone." Her voice was shaking. "I'm sitting normally, and nothing hurts." Richard Vaughn turned away quickly, but not before Ethan saw his face crumble. Saw the 6 months of helplessness break open into something that looked like relief and grief mixed together. Leo tugged Ethan's sleeve. "You did it," he whispered. Richard collected himself, turned back. His eyes were red. "Mr. Miller, His voice broke. He tried again. "You've given me my daughter back. I just listened to her. That's what everyone says they do. But you actually did it." Richard pulled out his phone. "I'm transferring payment now. And a bonus. Substantial. Mr. Vaughn, the payment we discussed is more than fair. The payment we discussed was before you accomplished in one night what a team of specialists couldn't do in 6 months. Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. His account balance had numbers he'd never seen before. "I can't accept." "You can. And you will." Richard's voice had shifted back to command mode, but it was different now. Not cold. Certain. "Because I'm not done asking for your help. The thing is," Richard continued, "I've spent the last few hours thinking about what you said. About asking the wrong questions." He gestured to the chairs. Ethan sat. Leo climbed up next to him. Sophia was still in her wheelchair, experimenting with positions she hadn't been able to use comfortably in months. "I've spent my entire career solving problems with money," Richard said. "Hiring the best people, buying the best technology, building systems that scale. And most of the time, it works." He looked at his daughter. "But sometimes the problem isn't complexity, it's simplicity. It's the obvious thing everyone's overlooking because they're too busy being impressive." He turned to Ethan. "You asked my daughter where it hurt. That's not revolutionary, but nobody else thought to start there. They started with research. They started with assumptions. That's different." Richard leaned forward. "I've built 3 companies from nothing, employed thousands of people, and I just realized I've been making the same mistake in all of them." "What mistake?" Sophia asked. "Listening to credentials instead of results. Trusting systems instead of people. Believing that expensive means effective." He shook his head. "Your wheelchair cost $60,000. It took a mechanic with a shop called Miller's Auto Rep IR to make it actually work." Leo giggled at the missing letter. Ethan felt his face flush. "I'm not trying to embarrass you," Richard said quickly. "I'm trying to make a point. You didn't have the tools those specialists had. You didn't have the training or the certifications, but you had something more important." "What?" "You needed to get it right." The words hung there. "The specialists could afford to fail," Richard continued. "They'd get paid either way. Their reputations would survive. They'd call it an iterative process and schedule another appointment. But you told me your son needed medicine. You told me you were desperate. That desperation made you careful, made you listen, made you unwilling to accept anything less than actually helping." He stood, walked to the window overlooking his estate. "I've been thinking about my companies, about the problems we can't seem to solve, the inefficiencies that persist despite throwing money and expertise at them." He turned back. "What if the issue isn't that we need better people? What if we need people who need to get it right?" "I'm not sure I follow," Ethan said. "My flagship company is Vaughn Dynamics. We manufacture precision medical equipment. We have the same problem you solved last night. Our products work beautifully in testing, but cause problems in real use. We hire brilliant engineers, but they're designing for theoretical patients." He looked at Sophia. "Not real ones." "Dad, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to hire Mr. Miller." The room went silent. Ethan's brain stalled. "I'm a mechanic. You're a problem solver. You understand the gap between design and reality, between what something is supposed to do and what people actually need it to do." Richard pulled out his phone. "I'm prepared to offer you a position as a special consultant. You'd work with our design teams, test prototypes, talk to patients. Be the voice of actual experience in a room full of theoretical expertise." "Mr. Vaughn, I don't have an engineering degree." "That's the point. Everyone in that building has engineering degrees. They all think the same way. I need someone who thinks differently." He named a salary that made Ethan's vision blur, plus benefits. "Healthcare. For you and Leo." Ethan couldn't breathe. Healthcare for Leo. Not worrying about medicine. Not choosing between rent and medical bills. He looked down at his son. Leo was smiling up at him with complete faith. "I need to think about it," Ethan said. "Of course. Take a week. I'll need 3 days." Richard smiled. 3 days then. They left with Richard's card in Ethan's pocket and Leo chattering excitedly about the fountain and the art and, "Did you see how big that TV was?" Back at the shop, reality settled in. Ethan sat in his office, staring at his phone. The balance was still there. The numbers hadn't disappeared. His first call was to Mrs. Park. "Is Leo okay?" "He's perfect." "Mrs. Park, I got paid today. Really paid. I want to give you..." "Stop. I watch Leo because I want to. Not for money. I know. But, Ethan, you're good to my nephew who works at the parts store. You fixed my sister's car for free. You leave groceries on old Mr. Chen's steps when you think nobody's looking." Her voice was firm. "You give all the time. Let someone give back." His throat was too tight to speak. "But," she continued, "if you really want to help?" The laundromat's washing machine broke. "If you could look at it," he laughed. "I'll be there tomorrow." Over the next 2 days, word spread. A wheelchair repair specialist who'd worked a miracle. Someone who could fix what the experts couldn't. The calls started coming in. A mother whose son's prosthetic leg kept causing blisters. The prosthetist kept adjusting the socket. But the pain persisted. An elderly man whose hospital bed had all the features, but gave him bed sores anyway. A teenager whose hearing aids were perfectly calibrated according to the audiologist, but still gave him headaches. Equipment that was technically perfect, but practically painful. Ethan took every call. Explained he wasn't a specialist, that he was just a mechanic. Most of them said the same thing. "That's exactly why we're calling." On the morning of day 3, a van pulled up to the shop. Not a luxury car. A medical transport van with a hydraulic lift. A woman got out. Professional clothes, kind face. She introduced herself as Dr. Patricia Morrison, Director of the Adaptive Equipment Program at Harbor Regional Hospital. "Mr. Miller, I've received 7 calls this week about your work, all from families who've been through our program. I'm not trying to step on anyone's toes. You're not. You're filling a gap we didn't know existed." She gestured to the van. "I have a proposal. Our hospital works with hundreds of patients who need adaptive equipment. We have partnerships with the best manufacturers. But we're seeing what you've identified, a disconnect between design and daily reality." She pulled out a folder. "I'd like to hire you as a consultant. You'd work with our patients directly. Test equipment. Provide feedback to manufacturers. Help train our staff on the difference between technical accuracy and practical comfort." Dr. Morrison. From Richard Vaughn. "I know, he called me yesterday. Gave you a glowing recommendation." She smiled. "He suggested we coordinate. You could consult for both his company and our hospital. Between the two, you'd have full-time work and then some." Ethan sat down heavily on a toolbox. "I'm a guy with a rundown shop. You're a person who listens when people say they hurt. That's rarer than you think." She set the folder on his workbench. "Read through it." After she left, Ethan opened the folder. The hospital was offering him steady contract work. Good pay. Flexible hours. Combined with Richard's offer, he wouldn't just be stable, he'd be successful. That evening, 3 more vehicles pulled up. Not luxury cars, regular people, carrying equipment that didn't quite work. Hoping the mechanic could help where the specialists hadn't, Ethan worked on each one. Listened, made adjustments. Sometimes it helped immediately, sometimes it didn't. But everyone left feeling heard. Around midnight, he was finishing up the last repair, a walker that was the right height according to the chart, but wrong for the person using it when his phone rang. Richard Vaughn. "Mr. Miller, I hope I'm not calling too late. I'm awake. I wanted you to know I spoke with my board today. Told them about you. About what you did for Sophia." A pause. "They've approved a new position. Director of Human-Centered Design. It would be yours if you want it. I haven't even accepted the consulting role. I know. I'm impatient. It's a character flaw." Richard's voice softened. "But I'm also serious. What you have, that ability to see past the impressive to the useful, that's what we need." Ethan looked around his shop, at the equipment he'd been fixing, at the growing pile of thank you notes from families. "Mr. Vaughn, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why does this matter so much to you?" Silence. Then, because I've spent 20 years building things, and in one night you reminded me why we build them. Not to be impressive, to help people. Richard's voice broke slightly. I watched my daughter sit without pain for the first time in 6 months. That's worth more than every award my companies have ever won. 6 weeks later, the shop sign had been replaced. Miller's Auto Repair in clean, professional letters. But the bay wasn't empty. It was busier than it had been in years. Half the space was still dedicated to regular repairs. Ethan had hired Jake Thompson, a young mechanic from 2 towns over who needed a break. The other half had become something else. A workshop, a testing space, equipment from the hospital, from Vaughn Dynamics, from families who'd heard about the mechanic who listened. Leo was doing better. The steady healthcare meant regular checkups, proper medication. Actually treating the problem instead of just managing symptoms. His cough had faded to occasional, his energy was back. He sat now on a stool, watching Ethan work on a prototype walker for a child about his age. "Why are you making it shorter?" Leo asked. "Because the kid using it is 7, but she's small for her age. The standard sizing doesn't account for that. So you're customizing it." "Exactly, like you did with Sophia's wheelchair." "Like that." Leo tilted his head, thinking. "Dad, you know what you're really doing?" "What's that, buddy?" "You're translating." Ethan paused. "Translating?" "Yeah. The engineers speak engineer language. The patients speak normal language. You translate between them." Leo said it like it was obvious. "That's your job. You're a translator." Out of the mouths of 8-year-olds. "You're absolutely right." A car pulled up outside. The familiar rumble of an expensive engine. Richard's Bentley. He came in with Sophia. She was using her wheelchair, the one Ethan had modified, and she moved with confidence now. No more tension in her shoulders. No more compensating for pain. "Mr. Miller." Richard greeted him. "Hope we're not interrupting." "Never." "What brings you by?" Sophia rolled forward. "I wanted to show you something." She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a letter from a university. An acceptance letter. "I'm starting college next fall," she said. "Engineering program. I want to design equipment that actually works for people." Pride flooded through Ethan. "Sophia, that's incredible. I probably wouldn't have applied if..." She glanced at her wheelchair. "If you hadn't shown me that equipment could be better, that it was worth trying to improve. You're going to change so many lives. I learned from the best translator," she said with a smile toward Leo. Richard cleared his throat. "We also wanted to invite you both to something. Next month, Vaughn Dynamics is launching a new division. Patient-centered design. We're hiring designers who've lived with disabilities, families who've navigated the healthcare system, engineers who are willing to listen before they build." "That's amazing." "It's because of you. What you showed us, that expertise without empathy, is just complicated uselessness." He extended an invitation. "The launch event. We'd like you and Leo to be there, as guests of honor." Ethan looked at the card. Formal event. The kind of gathering where people like him didn't usually belong. But maybe that was changing. "We'll be there." After they left, Leo came over and hugged his dad. "I'm proud of you," the 8-year-old said seriously. "I'm proud of you too, tough guy." "Why?" "I didn't do anything. You've been brave through everything. That's the hardest job of all." They stood there in the shop. The afternoon light streaming through the bay door. The sound of Jake working on a transmission in the next bay. The peaceful hum of a life that had been drowning 6 weeks ago and was now, impossibly, thriving. Ethan's phone buzzed. Another message. Another family with equipment that technically worked but actually hurt. He picked up his tools. There was always someone who needed a translator. 3 months later, Miller's Auto Repair had become something unexpected. A hybrid shop where cars got fixed and lives got improved. The hospital had expanded their contract. Vaughn Dynamics had made Ethan's consulting role permanent. Other companies were calling, asking for the mechanic who understood people better than products. But the thing that mattered most to Ethan was simpler. Every morning, Leo came down to the shop before school. Healthy now, strong, learning how to listen to machines and, more importantly, to people. Mrs. Park still stopped by. Not to watch Leo anymore, he didn't need watching, but because the shop had become a community hub, a place where people knew their equipment would be fixed and their concerns would be heard. The sign outside no longer had a missing letter, but inside, the philosophy remained the same as it had always been. Fix what's broken. Listen to what hurts. Remember that behind every problem is a person. Richard Vaughn visited monthly, sometimes with Sophia, sometimes alone. He'd told Ethan that their conversation had changed how he ran his companies. Not overnight, not dramatically, but steadily, persistently, toward something more human. One evening, as Ethan was closing up, a beat-up truck pulled into the lot. A woman got out, looking uncertain. "Are you Ethan Miller?" "Yes, ma'am. I heard you help people when their equipment doesn't work right." "I try. I have a son. He's got a condition. The doctors are great, but the equipment they gave us. It's supposed to help, but it's making things worse." Ethan put down the wrench he'd been holding. "Tell me about your son," he said, "and tell me where it hurts." She started talking. Ethan listened, because that's what he'd learned on that desperate morning 6 weeks ago when he'd driven to a mansion with nothing but hope and a tool bag. Money couldn't fix everything. Credentials couldn't guarantee success. Technology couldn't replace humanity. But listening, really listening to someone when they said they hurt, that could change everything.